Hello and welcome to my studio. My name is Michelle Gibbs and today I'm going to walk you through a painting to show you how to build layers in your work and to capture that beautiful light that shines through a wave. Today we're going to be using golden fluid paints. You can use whatever you have. I'll be working with titanium white, Hansa Yellow, Phthalo green blue shade, Phthalo blue green shade, Paynes Grey and Quinacridone Magenta. I'll also be working with just a few brushes. The Royal Langnickel 3/4 inch, a 1/4 inch shader and a number 1 flat. I'm working on a small panel, 6x8. I've primed it with gesso and I've pre-drawn my lines and I've gone over those with a light grey. You can either use the guides that I've provided or you can sketch your own. This is the reference image I'm going to be using today. Now you'll notice it already looks a bit like a painting, and that's because with this photo, I put it into Procreate and I worked over it to get a sense of where I wanted to go before I started. So you can either watch the demo first and see how it comes together, or you can paint along with me and pause whenever you need to. This is a really fun lesson, so grab your paints and let's dive in. So this is a fun sort of wave painting. It's really to show you how you can capture the light, and that's really an important part of the waves is not only the marks that you make with the kind of the froth and the foaming, but the light that you capture through the wave as well is really kind of important. So this is a really good one to just show you how to do that. So we're going to, I've got my lines on here. This is just a small 8x6 panel. And I'm going to start with my 1/4 inch brush. We're going to do a value study. So the colours I'll be using today are Phthalo green, magenta, Phthalo blue, Paynes Grey, white and Hansa Yellow. And then I have my medium over here. So we're going to start with a value study, and there are a lot of blues in here and I want to add a warm sort of undertone. So I'm going to start with my magenta and I'm going to thin that down and in fact I'm going to get a bigger brush and I've got a rag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop down this colour and then I'm going to pull away where the light parts are. So you have to be kind of quick when you do this because it dries very quickly. So I'll start with the sky. So when you come over here, just rub away where that lighter part is. So because it has a staining effect, you won't be able to get rid of all of it, but you can certainly remove some of it. So I'm going to go over the whole thing because a lot of it is a mid-tone, and then I can go back in with some of the darks. So again, just getting it a little bit lighter where that light part is. And then I've got my 3/4 inch brush and I'm going to mix up a magenta and some Phthalo blue. Now, don't get too bogged down with, I have put these lines in as an indication of where those kind of strips of water fall, but don't be a kind of a slave to those at all, because you can always bring those over the top. And you kind of want that flow in the painting as well. And if you painstakingly, I've just given you those just so that you've got those as a guide, but really if you become a slave to them, your work will feel very rigid and very not very spontaneous, if you like, and you really kind of want to capture that, particularly for something like this. So sorry, my colour goes a little bit all over the place. So I'm just wiping off the excess on my rag so that really I don't want it to be too dark, because essentially it isn't actually massively dark. So I'm just really looking to see where the dark falls. So under here is fairly dark, so I can make that mix just a little bit darker. And then just thin it out a little bit. So again, around here, just thin your water, your paint rather, just a little bit more as you sort of come to that light area, and just leave some of those lighter bits in there. We can go a little bit darker again, I think. So again, if I've got these larger areas, I might sort of try and work around them a little bit, certainly for the value study. But again, I want that really sort of free flow. So I might just add a few sort of touches up here. Just as a reminder really, more than anything. And so I'm going to get a little bit darker again. And just get into those really darker bits. Notice how I'm changing the angle of my brush depending on where I'm working. I'm really kind of making sure that the direction falls correctly and that I'm not making horizontal lines when I'm coming into the water. I'm making those lines, vertical. I'm making those lines horizontal, and so that they work, and I will follow that pattern of the wave as it moves round. So it's really important that you angle your brush when you're doing that. So again, just be a bit loose with it. Don't try and copy stroke for stroke. Just get the general movement of the waves, and you really want to work fairly quickly to be able to capture that movement. If you start doing this really slowly, then it will come across in your painting. Right. So let's dry that off, and then we can move on to the actual painting. So using the same brush, we're going to start getting in some of those darks. So I'm going to use some Phthalo blue and some Paynes Grey and a bit of white. And I'm just going to, again, look at where those darks, those real sort of darks are. And I'm just going to pop those in. And that's really going to help give it the depth. So just adding a bit of medium. So again, nice sort of long strokes as you come to the edge. So there's not huge amounts of real dark. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of white. So that dark really sits underneath and supports that top layer. And again, I can just bring a little bit of that into the water, into the part of the sea, just to bounce it around. And if I feel like I want to add a little bit more of the dark back in, then I can just grab some of that and just pop that in places if I need to. So I'm going to add a bit of white, a bit more white. And again, you've got this starting to get a little bit lighter up here, so we can pop that down and kind of just use the side of the brush. I'm changing the angle of my brush and just getting those sweeping sort of strokes in there. So again, we can just bring a little bit of this round. A little bit up here as well. So nice broad marks. So it's really about colour variation in something like this. I mean, in most paintings, it's about variation. So it's just making small tweaks to that colour and filtering it around the painting just so that it has that slight variety. So I could add, now I could just add a little bit of yellow. Just going to mix that up again because I added way too much yellow. So that was a Phthalo blue, Paynes Grey and yellow. And I'm just going to add a little bit of white, some medium. So now we've got a little bit of a variation of the green in there. And again, there's not huge amounts of it, but just here and there is just enough to add a little bit of variety as we build the painting. So that's really all we need there. So I'm just going to add a bit more white. A bit more phthalo blue, a bit more yellow. So again, we're sort of getting this green colour in. So I'm just flicking the side of my brush. Again, just bouncing that around, having a little bit of variation in there. So I'm going to mix up some magenta, some phthalo blue, and some white. And I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow just to knock out the vibrancy. So the yellow is obviously the complementary colour, and I'm going to just use some of that just in here a little bit. So I'm going to add some more white, just a bit more blue and a bit more magenta. And this is going to be this lighter part down here. So I'm just using the tip of my brush and I'm just kind of moving it in that direction to capture that effects of the crashing waves. And again, I can pop that down. So don't necessarily feel like you have to replicate what I'm doing stroke for stroke. Just try and be a little bit free with the marks when you're doing them. So I'm just going to add a little bit behind here. So that's going to create some of that depth when we start to break that up, just to have that dark underneath. I'm just going to mix up a little bit more of that. So just a bit more purple. I'm just adding a bit more blue and a little bit of white. It's probably a bit too much. Right, let's bring in some of those greens a bit more. Actually, first of all, I'm going to add a bit of magenta and a bit of white. And I'm just going to get this lighter part up here. So just kind of dot it around a little bit. So it might feel a bit like it's all over the place at the moment, but we're really just laying down the foundations at this stage and working our way up towards those brighter colours. So we really need to be able to have that in place for it to work. So I just added a little bit of white, and I'm just going to bring this in a little bit more. Notice how I'm just sort of flicking my brush back and forth. Okay, so let's get some of those blues and greens in now. So we're going to mix up phthalo blue and a little bit of white. And the first thing we're going to do is just going to pop a little bit of that into the water. It's just a lovely, lovely colour. So again, you can just sort of transition up here slightly. Don't want to go too far, too much, but and we're going to use a bit of that in the sky as well, so we'll do that shortly as well. So now we're going to add green and some medium, and we're going to start building up that lovely, lovely light. So again, I'm just moving in that direction, and it's almost sort of glazing over some of these other colours as well. And again, just popping a little bit of that variation down in the water. So adding some more white. So we're always just building up very gradually. So just sort of flicking the brush. Can you see how I'm just sort of flicking the brush? And again, looking to see if that's elsewhere. So add some of that over here. Maybe a few little flicks in the water. So adding some more white. Sometimes it might feel like you're just constantly going over things, but it's so important to have those bits of those darks coming through. Might want to add a little bit of medium or a little bit of water to help with the flow. Again, I might just add a couple of little touches in the water. We'll add those white bits in a minute, those lighter bits. So now I'm adding a bit more white and a bit of yellow. Just be careful of that yellow, it can take over quite a lot. Right, let's add the colour in the sky so that we can make sure we develop everything at the same time. So grabbing some white and some phthalo blue. A bit more blue. So over this side is going to be slightly lighter. So again, don't worry if you go over the froth because we'll bring that over the top anyway. And then as you move over, just gradually adding a bit more blue. So you'll notice that this is now that we put that in, this is starting to look a bit dark, and obviously when it dries it'll go dark as well. The first thing I'm going to do is put some of these white bits down here, and then we can start gradually building up those lights. I'm just going to grab my white, and I've got a little bit of residue on there, and that's fine. Doesn't need to be super white. And this is where you just need to just concentrate, but just let the brush move and do its thing. So this purple mix we've got here, I'm just going to add some more white, and I'm just going to go over. I'm just going to add a bit more magenta, just just warm it up a little bit. So again, we're just slowly breaking up some of that and moving into the lights a little bit more. It's amazing how much darker it can dry. So I'm just going up into the sky a little bit. And again, it might feel like it's a little bit crude at the moment, but once we sort of spray on the whites, it will have that lovely depth in there. I'm just gradually adding a bit more white. And again, I can use a bit of that down here as well. Just going to mix up that a little bit darker. Right. So let's lighten up again still. So again, we're going to go phthalo blue, white, and the green. So we need to make sure we add a fair amount of white because it will, like I say, dry darker. And again, we're sort of twisting the brush. So I might just move that a little bit more towards the blue. So I'm going to mix up some Hansa Yellow and some Paynes Grey. and a little bit of magenta to get this kind of golden colour that's sort of very subtly in the painting. So I'm going to add a few touches. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start bringing in some of the lights, and that's going to help us judge where we need to make changes as well. So I've got the purple mix, because it's dried a bit darker. I'm just going to lighten it again. So that's your phthalo blue, magenta and white, and we're going to start getting in some of this froth. So when we come to the smaller parts, we're going to actually go onto a really small brush. Sorry, dog barking. So let some bits go up a little bit higher. We're really going to lift this very gradually. We're going to have to do a few layers to get that white really sparkling white, but those underlayers will really help to support what we're doing. And again, I'm going to just bring a little bit of that down here. Make sure your marks are just a bit smaller as they go back. So now I'm going to go quite white. So where you've got sort of bigger clumps, then you can use a flat brush, and then when we've got those smaller bits, we'll move on to a slightly smaller brush. And when you come down here, these sort of bits are in the shadow. Just go back to your purple mix and just mix in a little bit of white and then use those as well. Probably make that a bit darker. So we're getting a variation of the marks in there, and the colour rather. I'm just going to mix up quite a bit darker and just bring a little bit of that into the water. So all those subtle variations, like I say, in colour that really make up the painting. So I'm going to get some more white. Nice clean brush, and I'm going to go between the brush I'm using and a small number 1. So let's grab some white. And again, don't worry too much if it feels too bright. It will dry a little bit darker. You see now how those variations of those values and colours underneath is supporting those top layers. Soften down some of those edges a bit. I will make this a little bit lighter up here. So again, I can go onto my number 1 brush. So yeah, just flicking it around a bit. So I'm going to just lighten up this purple a little bit more. I'm going to add some Phthalo blue, a bit of Hansa Yellow and some white. Just getting some of these lighter touches again. Just adding a few sort of bits that aren't quite there, but I think look quite nice. So I'm just going to add some Phthalo blue and some white. And a little bit of green. So now I'm just assessing if there needs to be anything more really. And I think the only thing I want to do is just add a few touches of the blue. So I'm going to add some Phthalo blue and some white. Lost a little bit of that, so I'm just sort of putting that back in, and then I'll go back over with the white. So I said about lightening this area over here, so I'm going to just grab some white. I've got a bit of blue on my brush already. I'm just going to add a bit of water. And I'm just going to lighten that a little bit. And then I'll just grab the blue over the top. And then I will get my white again. So having walked away from this painting for a few days, there was just something that was missing a little bit here. I just wanted to add a few lighter touches in here and a few lighter bits across here. So I'm just going to grab some white. I've just finished another painting, so I've just got some paints here, but really it's just a few little touches. So some white, some Phthalo blue and some Hansa Yellow. So quite a bit of white. Just a few flicks of that more sort of green colour, and then a little bit more towards the blue. I'm just going to get out a little bit of phthalo green. Just a tiny little bit. Sometimes just those little touches can make quite a difference. So sometimes if you think, oh, I'm not sure whether I should bother, you know, it's sometimes quite worth it actually. Just a little bit of water to help with the flow. And then just some white. And then I'm just going to add a bit more white to the green and just add a few little. And that's probably all it really needed. I really hope you enjoyed this demonstration as much as I did painting it. I love exploring different subjects because it really pushes your skills as an artist in new directions. And I'd absolutely love to see how your painting turned out. So if you do give this a go, please share it with me. I'd really love to see and celebrate your work with you.